Perfect. All right, well, thank you. We're going to get started here. Thursday, the last day of the conference. Very appreciative of everybody showing up here. This is a session around extending the value in Tableau through machine learning. If you thought you were coming here to hear something else, then maybe in the wrong spot. But hey, I promise you it'll be very entertaining. We've got a great story. I'm joined here by two gentlemen. I'll introduce them in just a second. The story I think is really compelling because it's got a couple things going on. One, CareerStep, the customer here has done a lot in a very short amount of time with their data. And they've been able to achieve that because they've leveraged partners and different technologies that all integrate cohesively with Tableau. And then two, I think Tony here has done this with really relatively few resources. He's not had to go and hire new resources to do some of these things that we'll talk about today. And again, I think that's sort of a testament to the ecosystem that Tableau has created in enabling different partners to build technologies on top of their platform. Just by way of introduction, my name is Nick Magnuson. I'm head of product and engineering at a firm called Big Squid. If there's anything you take away, it's the name Big Squid, because I promise you won't be able to forget it, for better or worse. We'll be joined here by Tony in just a little bit. He's with the company called CareerStep, and then Steve Erickson of Lime BI is a consultant that CareerStep's been working with and one of our more recent partners. Just a little introduction to Big Squid so you guys have an understanding of who we are and what we do. We are a relatively recent partner with Tableau, technology partner to be specific. I think we signed our paperwork about 2 months ago. So we have since built a automated machine learning platform that seamlessly integrates into Tableau. And again, if anybody wants more information on that, our booth is down by the swag shop, and we can give you a full demo. But effectively, if I'm going to leverage what I learned from the keynote Adam this morning, we're doing for machine learning what TurboTax did for tax preparation, right? Making it really easy to use so that an analyst can do it, not necessarily a data scientist. And that's something we're going to talk about with Tony today. Making that really easy for the average Tableau user to incorporate into their workflow and do that in a very seamless and integrated manner. So let me just set the agenda for today, right? We've got, I'll talk through a few key takeaways I want everybody to hopefully walk away from today. We'll talk about who is CareerStep and specifically how Tony has been building a data-driven culture there, expanding their footprint into not only descriptive, but going all the way even to prescriptive analytics in a very short amount of time, therefore scaling out the organization and extending the value that they're getting out of their data. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's next and what are the aspirations to take from here. Okay, so key takeaways. Again, this is a little bit of telling you what we're going to tell you at a very high level. Tony, in working with Lime BI in particular, in about 5 months went from having no data, literally no data, no visibility into it, to building a warehouse, to being able to visualize it in Tableau, and then being able to predict across some key measures that are important for their business, all within Tableau. Now just remember, that's 5 months, okay? And they've done that while, I think, extending and building that data-driven culture, enabling everybody within the organization, all the way up to the CEO, to be able to ask questions of the data, and then be able to produce solutions from their data that will actually answer those questions. Again, elevating that team, which Tony will tell you, he's a self-proclaimed analyst, doing all of that without having to bring net new resources in. So for everybody in the room here would consider themselves an analyst, I think there's the ability to elevate yourself to what we call a citizen data scientist, where you can actually do machine learning in the technology that you're already accustomed and familiar with using. And that's what we mean by extending machine learning, right? So we can do that in Tableau, and I'm very excited to walk through the story today, and hopefully that paints the picture of how you might be able to do that in your respective organizations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony to kick it off here and describe to us who CareerStep is and some of the things and challenges that he faced at his organization.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Good morning, I'm Tony Johnson. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence with CareerStep. I have over 20 plus years experience in research and analytics, specifically in the education space. So I feel like I can speak to you directly as analysts because that's what I am, what I do. So let me tell you a little bit about CareerStep specifically. CareerStep is a fully functioning online provider of education, specifically mostly in the healthcare space. We have trained hundreds of thousands of students in mostly short-term career-focused training. Examples of this would be medical billing and coding, medical transcription, pharmacy tech type programs. We also offer continuing education credits to professionals, healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners to do advanced cardio training, basic life support training as well. We're committed to helping students in the healthcare profession to get the success and the skills that they need in a very short period of time. A little bit more specific, some of what our company objectives are. We want to provide a very flexible, self-paced learning environment. We pride ourselves in giving superior customer support and providing very professional content. We own our own content when we develop it, we don't borrow. Again, provide very relevant training. But the one thing that we do is probably differential advantage that we have in the industry is that our cost. Everything that we do to help for these career programs, we do at about half the cost that you're going to see out in the industry. Most of our programs cost between $3,000 and $4,000 for our students. That's very important. We want to make sure that our students don't have a tremendous amount of debt when they come out of the program and they have the skills that they need. So really quick, just a quick background, and Nick talked about it a little bit. As of 5 months ago, we had no BI. We had a brand new CEO come in. Basically CareerStep was operating out of Salesforce reports. They were operating out of Excel. And we've heard this story time and time again. It was just not working. So our new CEO came in, and Misty Frost, and she said, okay, Tony, we've got to build a BI solution. And so the marching orders were given. We had to do some things very quickly and get things up and running very quickly. So my first step in that is I needed to find somebody, because I was a team of one at the time. I had to find somebody to help partner, to help me guide me through this very quickly. And that's when I was able to hook up with Steve and his group at Align BI and their expertise of building data warehouses, to building BI, to working with Tableau, they're a Tableau partner, to ultimately get to where we need to go. So we did several things real quick. We had to decide on a data warehouse. We settled in on Snowflake. Probably some of you are familiar with Snowflake. We had to settle in on an ETL. We got Illuma to help us with that. And then of course we brought in Tableau to help us with the visualization. So we had to build this foundation, and we had to build it quickly, and we did it all within about 3 months. And as we look at the kind of the data journey that we needed to basically get to and wanted to get to, we wanted to be able to answer the questions that ultimately come at us from the business. And you all, as analysts, probably get these questions. You get the question on the descriptive side, that is, what happened, right? You get that all the time. Hey, what happened? Give me a report. Let me see it. That in a Tableau environment, as you all know, much easier to answer what's happening, right? As long as your data is correct, you can show it, everybody can see it, that what happened. But you almost, as analysts, already know what the next question is going to be. Why did it happen, right? Why did that happen? And even more importantly, looking in the future, what will happen, right? And how can I actually influence it, right? So I think what's interesting about this journey that you're on is that we're in this descriptive world, and a lot of in the Tableau world, we're there. But how do we ultimately get to where we can be diagnostic, predictive, and then ultimately prescriptive. So just as way as an example, this is a Tableau report that we developed that is showing our month to date sales and cost and profitability. And what this shows is the various buckets between the month of October of last year to October of this year, and how well we're trending in the month and how well it's filling up those buckets relative. The gray line represents where we're trending to. So you can see in October, we're not trending anywhere near where our goal is relative. So in trying to get to the descriptive, we're trying to get to the trending, we're trying to get to what will happen, the whole idea of looking at the future. But again, kind of limited in the Tableau environment to where we want to get there. So it was also important that we built a data-driven culture to start actually having the interactions that we needed internally. One of the areas that we felt the most like we really needed to concentrate on initially was our sales and marketing. I think that's fairly intuitive in a company that has no BI, where they're going to concentrate a lot of their efforts is going to go, okay, let's look at the sales and marketing, let's figure out our best way to go about the specific area. So that was a lot of what we ended up building. And what we tried to do here was we tried to bring metrics together that we thought were important for driving our sales and marketing. So each of these bars actually represent an individual sales rep. You know, how well are they doing on their lead calls? How well are they doing on generating the accounts? How well are they doing getting qualified leads? How many days does it take? And then benchmarking those things. And we would look at these variables and we kind of compare them up to our overall sales, and we tried to determine with correlation coefficients, you know, yeah, we think this one's probably what we need to concentrate on. But again, we're taking a little bit of a guessing game there to decide really what are the variables that are pushing our sales, and then ultimately our marketing mix that we need to be able to go after there. So what basically happened was we got to a point where we hit a little bit of a ceiling. We were in that descriptive environment. We couldn't push past it. And I think for a lot of you, that could be where you're at. You need to be asked the question that gets asked of you all the time, why? Why did that happen? And what the heck are we gonna do about it to make it better? So, at least for us, the thing that where the kind of the area that we hit and the stumbling block that we hit was the pinpoint, the area that we, or the points in which we felt like we needed to move ourselves forward were really revolving around the fact that we didn't have or understand what our actionable data was. So as it related to the leads and the sales. And ultimately we had to get past the noise. With all these charts and all these things that we built, really ultimately, what are the predictive outputs? So as we did this, and as Steve helped me to put all this together, we realized that we needed something else. And so with his contacts at Big Squid, he felt that they were the solution that we needed. And it really needed to help us with two things. One was that it needed to enable our analytics, our analysts, and yeah, I actually did get some more resources, and I did grab a few people to help us, so I do have analysts helping me now. But that's to get to that advanced analytics, to answer those questions beyond the descriptive. But then what we also wanted to do is we also wanted to be able to qualify and score our leads. Which leads are the best for us to go after? Which ones can we maybe nurture a little different or treat a little different? So we wanted to be able to get a better feel for that and ultimately make an impact to the bottom line. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nick, and Nick's going to talk a little bit about how using Kraken as that tool to help us to go further along in the journey to help us to scale the organization. So Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So I really like this part of the story because, as Tony just mentioned, right, he was able to hire a few analysts, but they didn't hire data scientists necessarily to solve these subsequent problems around identifying what's likely to happen and what they could do about it, right? In our mind, a data scientist is the traditional means by which you deploy machine learning models into the organization. And just by a show of hands, how many folks here are part of, or their organization is using machine learning of some capacity? Okay, I'd say that's about a quarter of the audience. So traditionally, you know, you need this sort of resource. They're wonderful. They have a compendium of different skill sets. So in my mind, they're able to move data around. All right, they can move data in SQL or prep it in some other format. They've got the math and statistics that is required to implement that data into machine learning pipelines and do it in a way in which it's coded up in R or Python, so it can be programmatically done. And then lastly, and I think this is arguably most importantly, they have enough context of what the business outcomes and strategy needs to be able to, one, convey that to the business, and then two, be able to get people to adopt and use it. Now, I would argue that this is a very difficult resource to find. I can attest to it because I've got about 3 on my team on the development side, and they are expensive. But what we believe, and this is a little bit of the how in terms of Tony's story, how we get there, is enabling an analyst, right? Most of you would qualify as this, I would argue, because you're already doing things with data to prep it so that it can be used by the business in the form of visualization in Tableau. And because of that, you're already incorporating insights and business logic and business rules that are relevant for the way that your business operates, which means you have that acumen. Now, what we can do through technology is automate the other components such that you can become a proverbial citizen data scientist. Now, that's not our term, that's a Gartner term. But the fact of the matter is, analysts can now be empowered in our mind to be able to do machine learning and do it in their workflow, do it in their environment that they're comfortable with through this integration in technology. So let me just spend a second more on the how and how we actually operate in our platform, Kraken. As you can see here, that's in the middle of this diagram. To make this accessible and enable the analysts to do machine learning, we want to incorporate it into the workflow that they're already using. So for most of you, you're probably pulling data into Tableau from one of these source systems, whether it's an enterprise data warehouse, Tony mentioned Snowflake, or it's some sort of other storage facility. We pull that data in, and through an easy to use UI, you can build machine learning models and then deploy them back into those systems, meaning you can push predictions into those systems, which then enables you to visualize them in Tableau. And again, because now you have not only what data on what's happening today, which is your descriptive phase, you now have data on what's likely to happen. And so you can start to incorporate that into the visuals, the insights that you bring to the business. But now you're saying, this is what's happening, and this is what's likely to happen. And so the business now has greater visibility and greater transparency into what's ahead. Specifically with our Tableau integration, again, pulling that data in from these source systems, you can actually write data from Kraken into your Tableau server as a hyper extract using Tableau's extract API. So that data can be alive and in Tableau as a data source and already optimized for consumption in Tableau. So that gives you the option then to build visuals on top of that, or share and distribute that new data to other people that need to be making decisions from it. So moving into how CareerStep and Align BI helped extend the value that they got out of their data around this lead qualification issue, I'm going to invite Steve up to talk about more specifically how they use Kraken to do that.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, I'm Steve with Align BI. We started working with CareerStep in June of this year. And what we did for them is we brought the business together. We identified key metrics for the business. We defined those key metrics. We then prioritized those key metrics, and Tony mentioned we focused on sales and marketing. And then what we did is we started building the data warehouse. So we brought in the data from the many data sources. We applied the business rules that we learned from the business. And then once the data warehouse was built, we then needed to have a place where the business could go and visualize the data and interact with the data. And so we used Tableau Server to do that. In a short period of time, as Tony mentioned, we helped CareerStep go from Salesforce reports, where you might get a different question or a different answer depending on who's asking the question and what department, to the same answer when you come to Tableau, or an Excel report before. Now you could go to Tableau and get answers from the business with the applied business logic. So all of that was descriptive analytics. Now some of it I would argue is diagnostic analytics, because Tableau makes it so easy to interact with the data through dashboards that you can start to see why things are happening in the data. But as mentioned, what we see in data warehousing, as soon as you give people descriptive, where they can see what's happened and they can interact with the data and get a feel of why things are happening, the next question are always predictive. What's going to happen? What will happen? Or prescriptive. How can we have an influence? What's going to happen and how can we influence what's going to happen? And so once we got Career Step there, we got these type of questions. The CEO, Misty Frost, asked this specific question: how can we better qualify our pipeline of leads for enrollment and understand our marketing approach to impact the volume of enrolled opportunities? This is a big question for Career Step, because most of their marketing spend is used to bring in leads for their sales team. So how they're using those marketing dollars to get the best leads is important. And then the sales team, they work those leads, and most of their revenue comes from enrollments that they close from those leads. So that their enrollment, their revenue is determined by the quality of leads and how the sales rep works those leads. So very important question to ask from the CEO. So we took that question from the CEO as our marching orders. So, and Tony mentioned a little bit about that. We started trying to think of attributes, some gut feeling, some business interviews on what attributes and measures drive leads to enrollment. At this point, once we started bringing all those attributes in the data warehouse, that's when we introduced our Align BI's partner, Big Squid. We brought Big Squid in, introduced them to Career Step. We took this question from Misty, and we jumped into predictive and prescriptive analytics. So what we did next is we uploaded the data from the data warehouse, the data set, into Kraken. And within minutes, we went from gut feeling to empirical evidence. So empirically, we could see over on the left here what the drivers are for leads to become enrollments. I also like that we fed the data set at the lead ID grain, so the lowest possible grain. So Kraken is not predicting on the aggregate, Kraken is predicting on the lead level. And this will be important later as we talk through some visualizations and operationalize the model. The other thing I like is, instead of just using the top 5 attributes or drivers to build the model, Kraken uses all of the drivers and all of their predictive power. So it builds a robust model very quickly, within minutes. Over on the right, you see that within minutes, we get a score. So Kraken tells us the confidence we could have in its predictive power in predicting enrollments from leads. Again, all within minutes. Now, I will mention that this was an iterative process. The first time you might upload your data, and you might not get the best score, but you've learned what are the key drivers, and then you could iterate and add more of those type of drivers. And it's also cool in Kraken that you could, if you overdo something or you need to undo something, you could go back to your previous iterations with just a couple clicks. And so once we got the score that an excellent score and one that we felt confident that we could start predicting leads to enrollments, we then operationalized the model and started predicting it on the data and started letting the business use it. So let me show you, and we'll leverage Tableau here. And this is the cool stuff, I think, to show how this can impact a business. So as I mentioned earlier, because Kraken predicted at the lead ID grain, we now can roll up and slice by any attribute in the data warehouse. So if we put on our marketing hat, we can now slice the data by lead source. And so marketing could see in a Tableau visualization how many leads they have, how many enrollments they can expect from lead sources. This will help marketing make smart decisions on where they should spend their marketing dollars. So that's prescriptive analytics, right? On the right, they could also see the probability of a lead closing. So here, pay-per-click has 1,700 leads. 1,500 of those leads are in the 20 to 40% probability that they'll close. So what marketing could do is now make a smart decision on saying, do we want to send those 1,500 leads over to our sales team? Or should we do activities to help nourish those leads to increase the probability before we send them over to our sales team? So again, prescriptive analytics where the marketing team can start making smart decisions and leveraging Tableau and Kraken to do so. Again, because Kraken predicts at that lead ID grain, we could roll up at the sales rep level and slice by sales rep. And this helps sales operations. Now they could look at leads by sales rep. They can see how many leads they have. They could also see the probability of those leads that they'll close, allowing them to maybe think about structuring their teams around that. They could have a team that works just the lower probability leads. So they're doing the same sales activities, having the same sales conversations to close those type of leads. And then they could have a high probability sales team where they're having the same kind of conversations and the same activities to close those leads. So it could help sales operations and have them make prescriptive decisions, all using predictive models. Finally, again, because Kraken predicts on the lead ID, not on the aggregate, a sales rep can look at their individual leads and see the probability that a lead will enroll at the lead grain individually. And so they'll be able to make the best decisions on how to manage their time based on this knowledge. So you can see the big impact that Kraken can have. Not only does it allow you to quickly do predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, but allows you to push it out to the business so the business can impact from that analysis very quickly. At this point, I'd like to pass it back to Nick so he can wrap things up for us. But Kraken has been an amazing tool to help them.
All right, great. I hope some of those visuals brought some of the fairly esoteric concepts I was throwing out at the beginning to life, right? You can actually see how this could actually be used by the business, how it can drive value, how it can drive better decisions. So let me just spend a second on what the team here wants to do next, and I'm going to leverage a lot of our past experience with other customers in describing what a lot of our customers do as a follow-on to what you've seen so far. First things first, now that we know what drives the outcome, right? We have those empirical drivers, empirical ranking of those drivers. It's really important that stuff gets put into Tableau. If you want to increase enrollments, and you saw Steve articulate, we now know what the drivers are, those drivers should be things that you're tracking in Tableau, right? Because you want to be able to see that they're trending in a positive direction, knowing that if they trend in a positive direction, it will have a positive impact on the outcome you care about. So that's sort of first things, in what's next. I think the thing that I would articulate is probably more exciting is the ability to start doing more prescriptive work, right? So again, now that we know the drivers that actually affect the outcome, we can actually do scenario planning, what if type of work where, and literally do this inside Kraken. So as an example, we've got the drivers on the left-hand side here. In Kraken, you can start to say, well, if I could alter any one of these given drivers, I can move them up or down, or I can change the mix of the different lead sources as an example. I can contemplate what that's going to do for my outcome. You can see here at the bottom, we've got different predictions that would occur if you could move those drivers in that direction.
Nick, from an analyst perspective, this is big, right? You want to be able to know what those scenarios are. If you move that lever, what's going to happen overall? So that's a very powerful thing for us.
Yeah, and all of our customers want to get there, right? They want to have this discussion with their decision makers and have, it be driven by data and not, everybody's gut and instinct. So, that's a really, I think, valuable area to explore here. And then the last thing, this is, I think fairly obvious, really, is that once you've built that first model and you've seen the success out of it, you derive value out of it, it really catalyzes a wealth of different ideas about what you can do next, right? So as you saw that question from Misty, right, the CEO at CareerStep, she's already thinking about what does the marketing mix need to look like in order to optimize our lead qualification and marketing spend. So what she's thinking about is, if we can lower costs and be smarter about where we spend our marketing dollars and spend our sales resources, are the things that we can do to optimize the lead conversion and lead generation for that matter. So those subsequent use cases are where you start to build upon the value that you're getting out of machine learning. Now, a key takeaways, so again, to tell you what we told you, as you saw here, 5 months, they've able to, leveraging partners and leveraging technology, able to get a lot of value out of their data in a very short amount of time. 5 months, I've worked with organizations where they've worked on getting to descriptive analytics for years, right? So I think it's important to understand that there's partners, there's other technologies that we all can leverage that all are very symbiotic and synergistic, and I hate that word because it's like the most overused word in corporate America, but it's true, right? You can do that with partners. It also helps to instill a data-driven culture, because now that people can ask questions and then go and find the answers themselves, that becomes part of the culture, right? You're always questioning, you're always wanting to learn more about your data. And then third, this can be done in a lot of cases, leveraging technology to make yourselves more effective, to make yourselves more strategic in the way that you go to the business with these insights, right? It's one thing to go to the business and say, hey, this is what happened, but as Tony said, you got to know the next question is why. And then once you're able to articulate why, then the question is, well, what's going to happen now, right? And we need tools like what we've described here today to be able to help us answer those questions. And then lastly here, obviously, that can be extended through machine learning. That's the whole point. Getting to predictive and prescriptive sometimes can be very difficult, but if we can lower the burden as we've described here today, I think everybody here stands to gain by being able to answer those questions autonomously, as opposed to having to go out and either hire new resources or hire consultants to do that. In conjunction here, you've seen 3 parties put all this stuff together in a very short amount of time. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Before we do that, I do actually want to prompt Steve here to talk a little bit about, Align BI and Big Squid are now new partners. They're using machine learning, and I'd like to understand a little bit, Steve, like what are the conversations you're now able to have with customers as a result of being able to use technology to bring that conversation into the mix?
Yeah, I think it's helped us a lot to get to predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics faster, and to have the business drive that piece. Because as many of you are probably aware of the data warehouse lifecycle, you could get bogged down in just defining what happens by department for what you can make a career out of it, right? Where in CareerStep's a good example. They wanted us to focus on sales and marketing. Once sales and marketing was defined, they wanted us to jump into customer support. Once customer support is figured out, Tony's team and us will probably move to finance. And so you could literally do that across the whole organization, defining what happens and building the descriptive analytics. That it might take you a while to get to use the resources that know how to do data science. It might take you a long time to do that, but if you have a tool like this where you can insert or upload the data from the data warehouse and have an analyst build that model, you can do that. So we could build the data warehouse for sales and marketing, then the analyst could build a model off of it. We could then, while they're building their model, we could build the data warehouse on customer support, and then they could build their model about it. So it just enables us to get to predictive and prescriptive analytics a lot quicker in the life cycle. I think we've got some other questions.
All right, we'll see if this works. Is it on?
How about now? All right. My name's John. One of the things that I saw within the presentation was it seemed like a lot of the data that was there was kind of like a one-to-one type relationship. You know, you had your lead ID, you drill all the way down to the lead ID to maybe like a salesman or a customer and stuff like that. Did you run across challenges where you had a one-to-many relationship and a many-to-many type relationship? And what kind of steps did you go through to try and cleanse that data or even, you know, analyze that kind of data? And I guess it was kind of a two-part. It was like, how much data were we talking about too? Being a business developer myself, I run across millions, billions, trillions of lines of data that you've got to sift through. And so I just kind of want to see if you guys can talk about that. If you ran more of a one-to-one or a one-to-many or a many-to-many.
Yeah, I think the important thing is getting the question right. And so the good thing about this question was very specific. So we knew it was like at the lead level. But then you're right, there are complex things in doing that. Like we had to roll up, for example, a sales rep three different sales reps can contact the same lead. And so you have to build rules to decide who's, we can count the aggregate. So there is that kind of analysis that you have to do. And that's that iterative part, right? So initially when we put run it through Kraken, we see what's driving, and then we start building more variables or attributes. I think the Kraken term is features. We build features around those. So an example of this is if we wanted to find out, we wanted to give the sales team within 3 days the likelihood that the lead will close. So we had to build a bunch of features, and some of them were one-to-one, many-to-many, where we had to build rules to aggregate them correctly. But we built those rules into the data set after we ran it through Kraken, and we made decisions around it. And some of those were like, how many calls in the first 3 days? How many, what was the length? How many leads got contacted in the first 48 hours? You build all these features that are around the initial drivers, but they add more breadth to the model, and you've got to handle the more complex data. So there's a skill set to it, but the important thing is having the question right, and then being able to use Kraken to help you iterate until you get that dialed in. Did that answer the question all right?
Yeah, and Steve, just to add, I think the most important thing that Steve said there is you got to get the business question right. If you get the business question right and you can frame that with data, then all the subsequent, like what drives it, that becomes a pretty natural extension of that question. So, you know, if the question had been a little different, the data structure would necessarily have to be a little different. You might have, you know, a lot of one-to-many type relationships as you're describing.
Specifically on the Kraken machine learning piece of it, when you talk about getting the model right and then reiterating through the model to find the best predictors, and usually when you run one of those, like in Python, it gives you a weight for each one of those items. Are you just going to build, does Kraken just build that first model and the one that you like the most, you have your model file that it has generated, and now it runs everything through that one calculation engine? Or is Kraken the type that maybe you're using 1,000 trees at 1,000 trees levels deep, and you're using boost regression, and you want to switch that to a new model? Maybe Oxford rolled out a new model next month that's supposed to be amazing, right? Because all these, towers at academia pick these new models and design these models out of their science, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And you can go look at them online and download those and use those. How quickly or how often does Kraken or your relationship with CareerStep analyze if there's better models out there, if Kraken is consuming those models and tweaking that along the way?
Yeah, I can answer that. So Kraken has in it an embedded set of, let's call it best-in-class algorithms that are used, right? So they're generally followed, generally practiced, and have been well vetted by either academia or the market.
What are a couple of those that?
Well, I mean, you mentioned a couple. So we've got ensemble models, we've got regression models, you've got fairly linear approaches, right? So like an XG boost would be one, or support vector machines would be another.
And when you run your data into it, it tries to find a best fit model?
Yes, so it will run your data across all the appropriate sets of algorithms for the problem type that you're after. Again, this is a lead qualification, it's a yes-no, right? So there's a set of algorithms that Kraken knows are specific and appropriate for that problem type. Now, to your question around, you then select which model you want to use.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the best performing, and there's instances where that's not appropriate. But once you've selected that model and pushed it into production, as Steve was indicating, calling it operationalizing the model, right? Then that data is just being passed through that specific algorithm, right? You're not training anymore,
Right.
You're just passing it through. I would argue, I think the second part of your question, which is around retraining or looking at different approaches, that really, in my opinion, is dependent upon the data, right? If your data fundamentally changes, i.e. the drivers for the business now are different than they were when we first originally built the model, then it is appropriate to retrain, right? And the second part of that is, this is a sort of fundamental philosophy that I think everybody should adopt, in that no model is ever perfect, right? So you should always be constantly thinking about what additional data can I bring into the mix that might help give me better insight and better accuracy in what I'm trying to forecast going forward.
Hi, my name is Carl, and Tony, this is a question for you. So you mentioned you were using Salesforce reports. So 2 parts here. How would you rate the sales reps' usage of Salesforce as far as getting in the correct data and usage of it? And then after you implemented all of this, was there a change in behavior as far as maybe getting better data, inputting better data and usage for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you start using, obviously, just in a Tableau environment, you can start putting things up on the screen for the salespeople to start using, and they start realizing, oh my heck, I'm actually being measured now on some of these variables. Then yeah, it definitely, the environment changes, definitely. Everybody's a little more competitive, everybody kind of knows where everybody stands. So yeah, this idea of just putting data out when they're just looking at it, on their individual screen, on a Salesforce screen, that's one thing. But if you can push it out there where everybody's seeing it and they ultimately understand that, these things are being looked at now, and they're, we're making these decisions from trying to making decisions for more actionable data that we know are relevant, then yeah, absolutely changes the culture. So.
Yeah, and I would add one thing there. You saw the chart that Steve showed where it's got by rep. You can actually see how healthy their pipeline is, right? Because you can score how likely all their leads are to actually convert. So, reps may not like it, but it gives the business better insight, to what actually may come out of their efforts. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
everybody.
Yeah, have a great last day here at Tableau.